Hey, this is Idea Coach. He's a coach. He's Ron. We're in on the weight classes for UFC 158, headlined by Nick Diaz challenging for George St-Pierre's UFC welterweight belt. This is a welterweight heavy card, and I've never been a big fan of the welterweights in MMA because unlike boxing where things move very quickly with the welterweights, MMA is more about conditioning and strength and holding on and grappling. Either way, this is a fight that was years in the making, and it's taken so long for it to come to this point, whether it be Nick Diaz's self-sabotaging events, those two fighters being in different organizations, or George St-Pierre's injuries. We finally get to see this fight coming up this Saturday. Let's get into it. Welterweight bout. Johnny Hendricks versus Carlos Condit. Johnny Hendricks has been a breath of fresh air in the UFC welterweight division. That weight class has been more about wrestling than any other division in mainstream MMA today. A lot of people thought that he was just going to walk through Josh Koscheck with those series of knockouts that we had recently. That fight, however, had both of their stocks go down, with Johnny Hendricks getting the W. I'll explain more about the stock decrease and the Nick Diaz GSP preview I have coming up. Carlos Condit was originally set to take another fight with Roy McDonald in a rematch to a fight which he was losing to the very last minute. Now, that takes a lot of heart to come back and win like that. Roy McDonald got hurt, and the People's #1 welterweight contender Hendricks stepped in to replace the Canadian Psycho. If there's one thing I noticed about the people that fell victim to the power punches of Hendricks, is that his opponents are not known to be proficient strikers, at least not to the level of Carlos Condit. Someone who has a footwork and distance should be, at the very least, able to avoid getting finished on the feet by Hendricks. The Carlos Condit that lost to George St-Pierre will win this fight through sheer tenacity. The Carlos Condit that defeated Nick Diaz will lose because at some point within 15 minutes he's going to get hit. And point striking is too risky with a fighter who has a racer power. This is a little bit difficult to call because, one, Johnny Hendricks' main weapons is his hands at this point now. He didn't really use that wrestling in the Josh Koscheck fight. And Carlos Condit is a little more prepared. So if this doesn't end in the first 4 minutes, I'm going to lean towards Carlos Condit getting a unanimous decision win. UFC welterweight championship bout. The challenger, Nick Diaz, versus the champion, George St-Pierre. Please check out my vlog for my response to UFC's 158 conference call, where I go deeper into the implications of that conversation between Nick Diaz and George St-Pierre, so you have more of a well-rounded idea where I'm coming from when I make these picks. I called Johnny Hendricks the people's #1 welterweight contender, and I'm going to say this right now. Nick Diaz is the people's welterweight champion. I'm going to once again plug my vlog about the UFC 158 conference call because I feel that it's very significant in this point in time in mixed martial arts history. So please check that out. On to the analysis of the fight itself. I cannot think of a worse fight for Nick Diaz than George St-Pierre. Now, after losing 3 straight in the UFC in his first run, Nick Diaz really kind of came to his own and took the world by storm when he defeated Takanori Gomi. He lost to KJ Noons off a cut, which he subsequently got from the Gomi fight. And then he just pretty much went on a rampage. He hasn't really gotten any new skills as much as he's become much more efficient with his boxing, to the point where he makes his opponents take him down and then uses jiu-jitsu game. So he's one of the first guys that actually want you to take him down, especially in the welterweight division, which is very, very rare. That's more something for like a Shinya Aoki in the lightweight division back in Japan. George St-Pierre, however, is just cut from a different cloth. And the problem that I see for Nick Diaz, the main problem, and I've said this a number of times before, is that he only has really 2 speeds. A super slow speed, and then a medium speed. He doesn't have the ability to change his pace beyond that. George St-Pierre is going to use his wrestling, he's going to take him down, and he's going to use that sheer upper body strength that he has to avoid most of the submissions in which Nick Diaz can pull off. I don't see a go-go plotter happening, I don't see an armbar happening, I don't see a leg lock happening. Reason being because Greg Jackson's camp has defeated Nick Diaz twice already, one with Diego Sanchez and another time with Carlos Condit. They know Nick Diaz's game. And I'm sorry, I really want Nick Diaz to be the winner of this fight, but just everything lined up and facing George St-Pierre is all to his weaknesses and very few to his strengths. And since he doesn't really blast off early, and this is not like one of the times where I call someone, it's like, oh, if he can beat him the first round or beat him the first 6 minutes, he'll win. That's not the case. You'd have to beat him when George St-Pierre gets tired. And George St-Pierre may not have the actual cardio tank to match Nick Diaz. I doubt that he does. However, he is known to go for 5 rounds, which is 25 minutes. And that's really all he needs to do. George St-Pierre wins unanimous decision.